Thank you. Thank you. Well, he said it all. I'm going to sit down now. Thank you very much. Hello, fellow radicals. Before we start, what's a pirate's favorite gun? The AR-15. I know. You got to go tell it to your kids. It's awful. I just want to kind of bounce around a little bit and tell you a little bit about my history, because my history with guns and gun rights is America's history over the last 50 years. When I was 11, which is 55 years ago now, I killed my first deer with a semi-automatic .308 rifle, 55 years ago.
Model 100 Winchester?
Yes, sir, a Model 100 Winchester is exactly right. Great rifle, by the way. Yes, exactly was. I grew up, as Dave said, my dad was Rich Gresham, gun writer. He was the shooting editor of Sports and Field magazine. We always had lots of guns, like hundreds of guns. Because back then, different than it was today, there were only like 4 or 5 gun magazines. And so every gun that came out, they'd send them to all the 4 or 5 gun writers. So every gun that came out, we got. So that's a pretty cool way to grow up. You know, oh, can I take one of the guns? Yeah, sure. They all still had hang tags on them. You know, just take them out and shoot them. So I got to shoot everything. So let me go back, because I think there are, to put it in perspective, some think that gun rights started maybe with the Heller decision of 10 years ago. Let me take you back to 50 plus years ago. When I was young, before 1968, and that's our demarcation line, there was no such thing as an FFL. There were no licensed gun dealers. Any store anywhere could sell a gun. Hardware stores. There was no age limit on buying a gun. A 12-year-old could have a paper route or be mowing lawns and make enough money and go to the hardware store and buy a gun. Or could send the money in from an ad in the back of Boy's Life magazine and have it mailed to the home. That was normal. That's what's normal to me. What we have today is not normal to me. All right? Then we go to another thing, wait even further back. When my dad was going to school, he took a gun to school, put it in the coat closet, and hunted on the way home. When I was in school, we would have whole school assemblies on gun safety with real guns in the gymnasium. Can you imagine? They call the SWAT teams now. Now think about what happened. How did we get from there to here? A lot of things happened, and I'll touch on just a few of them. In the 1960s, we had the 60s turmoil. We had what was called the Dodd Bill, which became the Gun Control Act of 1968. I was debating that when I was 16 in high school. That changed a lot. Then we had licensed gun dealers, FFLs, background checks, a lot of other things going on. In 1969, I'm going to touch on a few things a lot of people don't think of when they think of gun rights. In 1969, Charles Manson committed the murders of Sharon Tate and some other people. In 1974, Truman Capote wrote the book about that, and it scared the hell out of everybody, okay? People started thinking, well, what would we do? Maybe we ought to think about getting a gun. That was a change. Because in the 1970s, at the time, before 1977, which is a demarcation point, the NRA was really about competition in hunting. It really was not much of a political group. We really didn't have much of a political entity for the Second Amendment in the United States. But people started changing. They said, well, maybe we ought to get something to take care of ourselves. And then in 1976, Jeff Cooper started a little school called Gunsight. And people started getting training in self-defense, real training. A gunfighting school is what it was. So things are starting to move now. And then something happened in 1980 that people don't think of when they think of gun rights and the gun rights movement. A fellow named Ted Turner started a network called CNN. Up until that point, and let me tell you, it changed things on both sides of the equation for us. Up until that point, a crime that happened in Toledo, people in Toledo knew about it. Now people in Houston and Denver know about it, and it started to feel as though those crimes were local. We got a 24-hour news cycle, and it changed how we thought about crime. So the gun ban lobby, my favorite term, by the way, call them what they are, the gun ban lobby, they jumped on that and said, well, we got to do something about guns because there's crime everywhere. Of course, crime hadn't increased. It just felt like it because we're getting nonstop coverage of it, right? But on our side, people are going, hey, there's crime everywhere. We got to get guns. We got to get serious about this. So both sides get energized out of Ted Turner's move. You know, so this is going on at the same time. So from Ted Turner, let's move forward through the 80s, and we start to get things happening on the concealed carry front. Florida passes the law that says people can get a permit to carry a gun for their own protection. And it was the end of the world, clearly. Because the media they bandied about the term, Florida was, instead of the sunshine state, they were the gunshine state. And they called for boycotts. Does this sound familiar? 30 plus years ago. Boycotts of Florida. Blood would run in the streets. Every fender bender would turn into a shootout, yada, yada, yada. And then as state after state after state after state passed concealed carry laws, every time blood would run in the streets, every fender bender would turn into a shootout, and it never happened. And a year after it passes, there'd be a little article about this big on page B12 of the newspaper that said, Sheriff so-and-so said he was surprised there really has not been an increase in crime, yada, yada. Yeah, really? No kidding. So here we are. How many people in this right here have a carry permit? How many women have a carry permit? God bless you. Okay. I'm just going to tell you. We're going to get to that in a minute. So something started happening, and then let's move forward. We're clicking along here. We get the Heller decision 10 years ago. But before that, we had the Emerson decision. Don't know about that one, but it was important. And then we have people like Dave Kopel and a lot of other really smart people who think they're not playing checkers, they're playing 3D chess. They're working in a world that and sometimes I get to sit in a room with them, and I'm like, man, you guys are crazy smart, and you're actually dangerous. I like that about you. I really like what you're doing here. Because they're working several levels out. They're just like, well, we're going to do this case, and then we're going to do this case, and this case. People say, well, why don't you just go for the goal? Well, you can't go for this one yet because you haven't set it up. You can't throw a touchdown every time. You got to make 3 yards and 4 yards and 5 yards at a time. Let's talk a second about the gun ban lobby. Who are they? What do they do? And what do they believe? Okay, first of all, let's get this out of the way. They don't hate guns. They hate you. They hate us. It's not guns. They hate us. And there's a lot going on here. I'm going to play armchair psychologist, okay? Listen to their words. What do they say? Well, we want to feel safe. We have the right to feel safe. You notice they don't want to be safe. They want to feel safe. What prevents them from feeling safe? Us protecting ourselves shows that they are not willing to protect themselves. If nobody can protect himself or herself, then they can pretend that doing nothing is safe. We are the thing that destroys their self-image of being or feeling safe. They want to feel safe. They don't want to do anything to be safe. So that's why it's not the guns that they dislike. It's us being self-sufficient. It's us taking care of ourselves and them not doing it. And when they look at the contrast, they realize, oh man, I really should be doing that, but I'm not going to do that. So I have to get them to stop doing that so I can feel better about me not taking care of myself and my family. As far back as the 1950s, now here's something interesting. If you go back to late 50s, the poll that was done was 59%. I rounded off to call it 60% of the people in America were in favor of banning the private ownership of handguns. Say that again. In the 1950s, 60% of Americans were in favor of banning handguns. It's gone down, 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 down. Why is that? Once you get a gun for self-defense, you don't want to ban handguns anymore. Hello, welcome concealed carry. And 50% of the people getting their concealed carry permits today are women. And that's the big change. That's where we win. Frankly, that's where we win. Because it's not a bunch of gray-haired guys like me yammering on about it's my right. It's a lot of women, young, middle-aged, older, whatever, talking about safety and taking care of their children and taking care of themselves. Here's the thing. Obvious to every woman in here and not obvious to most men. Women think about their safety and their vulnerability all the time. Men don't, because they are subject to different kinds of attacks and they are less physically able. And when you empower them to say, this is a tool you can use and it's effective, it's a game changer. It changes your life. It changes your life. And that's where we need to be. We need to be talking about this. The number one reason that people have always given for why do we own guns is self-protection. Not hunting, not competition, not anything else. It's always self-protection.
From the government.
Well, there's that. Protection, self-protection primarily, but yes, protection from the government. And what's happened is, you touched on something very interesting. The core reason that we in America protect so vociferously our gun rights is because we have come face to face with the realization that the government cannot and will not protect us. We are utterly on our own. Case in point, and this was a true demarcation point in the Second Amendment battle, and nobody thinks about this. 2005, Hurricane Katrina. On national TV for days and days and days, you saw what happened when there's nobody there to take care of you. Looting, rape, murder, anarchy, all the rest of it. And people looked at that and said, oh my God, honey, what are we going to do? Well, that could happen here. Yes, it could happen there. It could be a power outage. It could be a hurricane. It could be a whatever. It could be on a small scale. It could be on a bigger scale. And people said, what are we going to do? I don't know. Well, maybe we ought to get a gun. And they went there. They went fast there. At the time I'm doing the radio show, I'm talking about all this. We produce TV shows. We teach people to use guns for self-defense. If you go on our YouTube channel, just look for Gun Talk on YouTube. It's going to be the easiest way. We have a whole series on putting people into self-defense situation. They get attacked. They get robbed. They get the kids stolen from them. It's carjackings, and they see what they do, and we train them up. It's fabulous. It's really good stuff, even if I do say so myself. But I'm doing the radio show, and people are calling the show, and I'm starting to hear there's a change. There's a change in who is calling the show and what they're saying. And I'm getting people in their 50s and 60s and 70s calling and asking about buying a handgun, their first handgun. And I said, well, what's going on? Well, you've never owned a handgun and you're 65 and you're buying. Yeah. I said, well, what's going on? I don't know. I just don't like the way things are, and we want to be prepared. Heard it over and over and over again. And something else about that was interesting. When you're 55 or 65 or 75, you just walk into the store and say, here's the plastic. Give me what I need. I'm not looking for the cheapest gun. I'm looking for what I need. It was a change. I started telling the gun industry, the gun makers, this is happening. And some of them didn't quite understand, and then all of a sudden the sales started changing. Then about 5 years later, I said, there's something else happening, guys. Women. And they're going, yeah. I said, no, listen to me. Listen to me. They're calling the show now. They're wanting to know, what do I get? Where do I get? Well, they always ask, what gun should I get? And I always say, don't buy a gun. And they stop. You're the gun guy. What do you mean? I said, go take lessons so that now you know which gun to buy. It's like me walking in and just buying golf clubs. I've never played golf before. What do I buy? I don't know. Get some lessons. Find out. Get some training. And the guys who call and say, I want to buy my wife a gun, I say, sorry, you don't get to. What? No. You do not get to buy her a gun. You'll get the wrong one every time. Even if it's the right one, it's the wrong one. To just start off with understanding that right off the bat. Okay? Just is, okay? What you do is you get to buy her a lesson, or 2 or 3 or 4 lessons, if possible with a woman shooting instructor. And have the instructor bring several different guns. And at the end of the time, your wife can then buy herself the gun that she wants. And oh, by the way, you don't get to be there in the middle of the lesson. Go somewhere else. Go do something else. Don't be a part of this. And you'll be amazed at the women who call and say, thank you. There it is. So we've gone from no such thing as a licensed gun store to background checks, to instant background checks sometimes, to magazine limits, to maybe not magazine limits, and I understand where I'm standing when I'm talking about this, okay? The battle has shifted very much from the federal to the state world. There's huge money pouring in from billionaires, but at the same time, on the other side, we have huge influx of new shooters. I see a fair number of younger, and by younger can be almost anything for me right now, younger people out here shooting. And I would like to call you all shooters, but actually I was out there today. I saw some of you. No. So, you know, understanding what's actually going on is important. And it reminds me of I live in Louisiana. We had a couple down there, and the lady went to the doctor, and she wasn't feeling right. And she's 67 years old, and he did a test and came out and he says, Miss Johnson, you need to sit down. I said, what do you mean? He says, you just need to sit down. So, oh, what's up? He said, well, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're pregnant. And she just laughed. She said, that's silly, doctor. She said, I'm 67. He says, I know. I've been your doctor for 40 years. He says, you're pregnant. And the enormity of it hit her. She says, may I use your telephone? I said, well, sure. She called her husband, John. John's 72. She's distraught. She just breaks out, John, you SOB, you got me pregnant. Says, long pause. John says, who is this? Sometimes there's a story there you don't really understand what's going on, you know? So that's kind of how we got to where we are today. The Heller decision was enormous. We are able to fight other battles now because of Heller. Assuming we can get Judge Kavanaugh to become Justice Kavanaugh, that's a new day. And you can tell how important it is by how much they hate it, how much they want to fight against it, which means we have to fight. I do want to just thank all of you who are here, because you are here. You are doing this thing. It is amazing how effective it is when you tell the truth and shine the light on it. The lies that are out there, and Dave talked about it, that get perpetrated through the media. I actually had a media guy, a friend of mine. He was talking to some of his real mainstream media people, and they said, well, you know, we can't come to your shooting event. I said, what do you mean you can't come there? He said, well, we're not allowed to report anything positive about guns. I said, what are you talking about? He says, well, we'll get fired if we say anything positive about gun ownership. Not kidding. So when you start to wonder, how does this happen? That's how it happens. So when they're giving out this phony information, we used to not be able to fight it. Gun Talk Radio, 23 years ago, the first radio talk show, it was an end run around the media. We didn't really have social media then. We barely had an internet then. Now we have all these different ways. We got podcasters out here. We've got people who are communicating in all these different ways. We keep shining the light. We keep telling the truth. And we have the information on our side. The CDC tried to hide this study for 20 years, and we just found out about it. And they, once again, it's interesting how often the same numbers keep coming up. Roughly 2 to 2.4 million times a year, people in America use guns in self-defense. That's 6,500 times a day that people use guns to protect themselves or stop a crime. Almost all the time without having to pull the trigger. It's amazing how persuasive it is. when you pull a gun out and point it at somebody and they suddenly remember a prior appointment and they go away. That's a win, okay? That'll work. That's a message we have to be able to deliver. We have to be able to do it in sound bites. You have to be able to do it in a convincing way. And remember, and this is because you're all activists, you're all out there. The goal is not to convince the anti-gunners, the gun ban lobby, that they're wrong and we're right. That's not going to happen. They're there, we're here, and this thing in the middle is the American public. And we can debate them, but understand we're actually, our audience is the people in the middle. The more reasonable we sound, the crazier they get, because it makes them nuts when we're reasonable. It drives them crazy. And we just keep saying, well, you know, the CDC says 2.4 million times a year people use guns. That's not an NRA number. It's not a gun guy number. It's a CDC. And you get your information, you keep throwing it out there, and you're reasonable. Honestly, when I started Gun Talk Radio, people kept saying, oh, you got a hunting show. I said, no, it's a gun show. What do you mean it's a gun show? It did exist. Well, I said, here's my goal. Because at the time, I was writing for Guns and Ammo, and I've written for all the gun magazines, edited most of them. I said, my goal is real simple. When a couple is going down the road, and they're hitting the scan button on the radio, and they land on this show, and they hear us talking for a while, and if they say, well, you know, those people sound like they're having fun. They sound like really normal people. They're not what we've been told. That's a win. And that's how we win. It really is as simple as that. So we're at this place, we're all fighting this fight, and Dave's doing a wonderful job. The Independence Institute and others like it are doing a great job. Thank you all for supporting, for being involved. And just, if I would, just ask you to keep understanding that this fight is 50 years old. It's actually more like 100 years old in this country. It will go on for another 100 years. There is no winning it. It's just the next battle. But from the days of the Clintons, when we weren't winning anything, we are now winning a lot. And we're winning a lot in the courts as well as in Congress and legislatures. Win some, lose some, but on balance, we're making a lot of headway. We can't get the goal line all at once. We win a little bit at a time. We take it back the way we lost it, incrementally. Understand that, commit to the long term, because that's what it is. We're all going to be here. When I'm gone, some of you will be carrying on. When you're gone, somebody will be carrying on behind you. Again, thank you so much for everything that you do. I appreciate it. It makes my job easier. And some of you just need to keep practicing out here, okay? Thank you very much.